Well, hey, good morning, tribe. Come on, let's stand on our feet this morning. We're going to sing a couple Christmas songs. We're going to have a good time. Come on, I know you know it. So sing along with us this morning. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Let every heart prepare Him room. In heaven and nature sing. In heaven and nature sing. We will sing joy. We'll sing joy to the world. Joy to the world, the Savior reigns. Let men their songs employ. While fields and floods, rocks, hills, and plains repeat the sounding joy. Repeat the sounding joy. Come on. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. Joy to the world. We'll sing He rules the world. And He rules the world with truth and grace. It makes the nations prove the glories of His righteousness and wonders of His love. Come on, in wonders. In wonders of His love. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. Joy to the world. Well, we will sing, hey. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. Joy to the world. Come on, last time, sing it with me, hey. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. We will sing joy. Joy to the world. We sing it out, hey. We sing of your name, God.
And hark the herald angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Peace on earth and mercy mild, in God and sinners reconciled. And joyful are ye nations rise, join the triumph of the skies, and with angelic hosts proclaim, Christ is born in Bethlehem. And all the angels sing, and the angels sing, glory to the newborn King. Christ by highest heaven adored, in Christ the everlasting sing glory to the newborn King. Holy and-born Prince of Peace, hail the Son of righteousness, light and life to all he breathes, risen with healing in his wings. Mild he lays his glory by, born that man no more may die, and born to raise the sons of love, born to give them second birth. And how like the angels sing glory to the newborn. How like the angels sing glory to the newborn. How like the angels sing glory to the newborn. How like the angels sing glory to the newborn King. This next song is so special to me because it's the first song that we sung here in this building as Tribe Church. I can remember thinking how powerful it was to sing the first words, peace, bring it all to peace. And isn't that the goal? To spread that peace that passeth all understanding, that hope, to give light. Peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, and still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Your name is light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is life forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. The shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome.
Come on, sing this out, church.
Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is alive, forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome.
Come on, church, sing this out. Sing Jesus, hey.
Jesus, Jesus, oh, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Oh.
Good morning, Tribe Church. My name is Pastor Matt Dilley. Whether this is your first time at Tribe or first time in a long time, we are so excited that you are here. Here today is our Give Light Sunday. We've been talking about this for several weeks now, but it's the day that we are raising. Everything we raise today is going to paying off people that we don't know's bill for electricity, that their bill is about to be turned off, right? So the goal of today is that we raise enough funds to pay off 20 families' electricity bill. And we are well on our way, and obviously we've mentioned it for a couple of weeks, but we have an anonymous donors promise to give dollar for dollar for the first $2,000 raised. So last year, we'll get into that later. I'm just saying, like, our goal is to pay off 20 families' light bill today. So we're gonna pray for that. God, we thank you for being such an amazing God. I thank you for the opportunity that we have, Lord, in this season, in this year, God, to be a demonstration of your love that we have today to give, God. And God, we want to help keep the lights on for those people, God, people that we don't know, people that maybe don't know you, God, not because we just want to do something good, God, but because we want to make your name more known. That light represents your love. That light represents the emptying of darkness, God. That light represents your goodness and your grace and your truth today. Let's sing your praises today.
Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
Amen. So excited about today. Obviously, we have our worship guides that you could find around at any of the tables around the room. There's also an offering slip in there. We'll get into that later, but obviously feel no obligation to give. So we're so excited about today, but you know, next Sunday is actually our Sabbath Sunday. So if you come, we won't be here. No one's going to be here, so feel free to come to that, but no one will be here. But that's okay. We may not have next Sunday because we'd like to have that time off for volunteers and things like that, but we do have a Christmas Eve service this Christmas Eve, which is Wednesday. Is that Wednesday? Thursday. Never mind. I don't know what day it is. It's Sunday. Thursday, it's Christmas Eve. We have two services, 6 and 7:30. Feel free to come to either one of those. Come to both of them. That's fine, whatever. This is our first time we've had Christmas Eve, obviously, on Christmas Eve, so that's kind of an exciting thing. It's a big thing. So Christmas Eve, that's Thursday. Sunday, we skip, right, because it's Sabbath Sunday, and then we'll be back for the beginning of next year. And the beginning of next year, I think it starts on January 3rd is our first Sunday back. Is that right? Oh, great. January 3rd is our first. Yeah, I'm not usually doing the announcements. So January 3rd is our first Sunday back, and we start our 21 days of prayer and fasting. 21 days of prayer and fasting. Now, you may be like, oh, man, fasting for, like, am I not eating for 21 days? No, it looks different for everybody. There's food things that you can give up. There's, what we call like cultural things or social media and things like that you could potentially give up. We'll send out a video of that over Sabbath Sunday so you can kind of talk about that and think about that, pray about that, what you want God to do. But we think it's so important. We do this every year as a church. We start off the year by saying, God, we're going to put you as a priority. God, you're the number one thing in our life. And I'm not just going to say that. I'm going to demonstrate that with my actions. And that's why we start off with the 21 days of prayer and fasting. And there's other churches. There's other tons and tons of churches that are going to be doing this with us for 21 days of prayer and fasting to start off the year 2021. And we're very excited about that. We also have ornaments that we are giving out today. Ashley Rice made them, and my favorite part about that is I didn't have to make them, and I didn't even have to think about making them. She just did it, right? Like, she was just like, I made these ornaments. And we're like, that's amazing. That's awesome. So if you want one of those, make sure you pick one of those up today. Yes, we could celebrate her. She's great. Anyways, why don't you take a second, greet someone around you, and say, I'm so glad it's not raining today.
Good morning. My name is Pastor Carrie Dilly, and I'm so excited you're here. If you're joining us online is working. Can we just get like and it's been a long day coming, but yes, online is working. We are so thankful. So if you're joining us online, we are so excited you're here. If you're joining us in person, we're so excited you're here. We're just a lot of excitement today. Last week, I got the kind of message that no one wants to get. I had not one, but two friends message me and say, hey, I just got spam from your phone, like from your actual number. And this for me was it was bad news, because if my phone had been hacked and sent spam and like number, you know how like they do that where they like send spam, but it's from your number, that meant that their phones were probably now vulnerable, and possibly their contacts too, because stuff like that just like spreads. It spreads like wildfire. And it happened at the worst possible time of day. Like, it was late, it was tired, I was embarrassed, I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want it to be true that my phone had been hacked. And so I did what any irresponsible person would do when they receive bad news that they don't want to be true. I ignored it. Yeah, just wait, just say it gets better. I went on with my evening, I went to bed, and I woke up, and the first thing I thought when I woke up that morning was, you should not have gone to bed without dealing with that phone thing. Like, who knows what has now happened to your phone, to your identity, to your credit cards, to your contacts, and their identity, and their credit cards, and their contacts, and their identity, and their credit cards, and this just goes on and on and on. So I get up my phone, and I start looking at it, and I start checking into some stuff, and I was actually able to find the spam that had been sent from my phone to my friends' phones. And as I looked at it, it didn't look like normal spam. You know, at this point in the game, like, we kind of have an idea of what spam looks like. Like, they've got the 0 instead of the O in the word Amazon or something like that. And so I dig around a little bit, and nothing else in my phone is amiss, and nothing else is a problem. And I got to looking at it, and the more I looked at it, I looked at the time that these were sent, and I realized that right at the same time that these messages were sent, I was actually on the phone. And so what must have happened was my phone screen got unlocked, and my face sent some spam-looking stuff to my friends, because it really looked more like when a toddler gets a hold of your phone, which is good news of great joy, right? Like, my phone is safe, my friends' phones are safe, and now all I have to do is text these two people and be like, hey, I'm an idiot who doesn't know how to work her own phone. And for those of you who don't know me outside of just being one of the pastors here at Tribe, this is actually my second career. My first career was I was a teacher for 15 years. And during my time as a teacher, I earned a couple of master's degrees, one of which was in technology. So me, with my master's degree in technology, gets to text two of the people in my life and tell them, hey, I am an idiot who can't work their phone. And for me, that is very bad news. Like, it's good news that our phones are okay, but it's bad news to have to call them and be like, hey, I made a mistake and it affected you and I'm sorry. I think it's amazing how two different people can hear the same piece of news and have two totally different reactions to it. Because I'm sure when they heard that news, they were like, yay, your phone's not hacked, you're just an idiot. And I'm like, oh. Yeah. So one of the things that I thought about doing to start this sermon series off was to throw a headline up on the screen and say, like, is this good news or is this bad news? And I had a good one, you guys. Like, some of you were going to be like, yes, that is good news. And some of you were going to be like, whoa, that is bad news. But we are not going to do that today because I think that it would make some people be like, whoa, some people reacted like that. I'm out of here. I'm done with Tribe. Like, I don't want to do that. Like, so we're not going to do that. But we have spent the last couple of weeks talking about how Jesus' birth, when it was originally announced to the shepherds, was proclaimed to be good news of great joy for all people. Think about that word all there for a minute. Good news of great joy for all people. There is not a lot of news out there that's good news for all people. Unfortunately, a lot of times, good news for some people means bad news for other people. And if this news is such good news, and it's for all people, why isn't the entire world leaning into Christianity? In fact, why is it that people are actually leaving Christianity? I heard a story of a woman recently who had deconverted from Christianity, and she said, it's wonderful because I don't have to hate anymore. It's wonderful because I don't have to hate anymore. Now that I'm not a Christian, I don't have to hate people. I know that was a really dramatic time to take a drink. I see people leaving the church and flocking to nonprofits and organizations that are doing the work of Jesus without the message of Jesus. And I don't think they're doing this in like covert, sneaky ways. I think they've gotten tired of the message of Jesus as it's being presented in the American church. And so they're out there and they're caring for the poor and they're caring for the sick and the widowed. And they're doing great work in communities all over the world. They're loving people no matter what, no matter who they are, no matter where they're from, no matter what they believe, no matter who they love. And they're doing it all in the name of love, but they're not doing it in the name of Jesus. And I think it's because the version of faith that is being presented in a lot of our churches is not good news. The version of faith where you have to or you get to hate a specific group of people, or a version of faith that is just rule after rule after rule that you have to follow. None of those versions of faith are good news. That is bad news. And as we've said throughout this series, a lot of people will say that their aversion to faith revolves around the question, is it true? But in reality, what I think more people actually are wrestling with is the question of, is it good? And it's not that they don't care if it's true, but proving that it's true in the year 2020 is actually the easy part. Like, you want to know if it's true, you can do research as a lay person, as a non-pastoral person, that people, 30 years ago would have died to be able to do the research that you can do, okay? You can read all kinds of different things. One of the things that Matt and I always recommend to people who are sort of wrestling with the whole is it true thing is a book called The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. And if reading isn't your thing, spend an evening with Pastor Matt. See if you can track down Danny Wright, who spoke at our first Wednesday, this past December, spoke at our December 1st Wednesday. And buy him dinner. Like, those guys can talk you through beyond a shadow of a doubt that this story is true. Guys, it's true. Okay? And for a lot of people, it doesn't even matter if it's true or not. Like, they never even get that far, because what they really want to know deep down, and maybe that place that they're not even aware of, is they want to know, is it even good? Because if it causes me to hate even one group of people, that is not good news. We've said that throughout this series that when we hear we hear news that isn't true, we hope that it's not true. Is it good? So bad news, not good news. We hope that it's not true. Like when someone that you love gives you awful news about their health, we immediately think, well, that can't be true. Go get a second opinion. Not that second opinions are bad. That's actually a good thing to do. But remember what we said that first week. What are the first two stages of grief? Denial and bargaining. When we hear things that are not good, we hope that they're not true. But the opposite of that is true as well. When you hear good news, you hope it's true. You automatically want to believe it. When your friend who's been trying to get pregnant forever tells you that she's expecting, you don't think to yourself, well, I hope that's not true. You don't think like, oh, that can't be true. There's no way that's true. You don't do that. And if the message of Jesus is good, then why are people not leaning in and hoping that it's true? Why are there versions of faith out there that are so not good that people are looking to get out of them? Jesus' birth 2,000 years ago was announced as good news of great joy. Not just for that family or that city or that country, but for all people. And this was shocking. And it really should be shocking still today, because it's very hard to imagine news that is good for all people. Generally speaking, good news for one group of people is bad news for another group of people. Like back in July, before the presidential election was months away from happening, I knew that on November, whatever day they finally decided the election, because I knew that was going to take a minute too, because that's how it goes now, guys. Just get used to it, okay? It's like Indiana when it rains. You know how it rains and everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's never rained before in Indiana. Yes, it has. Calm down. No, I knew that about half the country was going to be upset about who won the presidential election, because our country is deeply divided on every important issue. That's how it's going to go. So good news for one group of people is bad news generally for another group of people. But this news of Jesus' birth and Jesus' life and his death and his resurrection, when they wrote it down, they just decided to call it the gospel, which literally translated means the good story. It's actually kind of a lazy title. They're like, what should we call this thing? And they're like, well, it's good news of great joy for all people, so let's just call it good story and just get the message out there that way. That should do it, right? So why the resistance? If this is such a good story, why would anyone be looking to get out of it? Why don't people come here to Tribe just wishing that the news of Jesus was true? Why is there a resistance to Christianity beyond that it's true? Why is it that it's good? Or is it good or isn't good? Whatever. Why do more people not want it to be true? When you hear good news, you want it to be true. You don't resist it. You don't do that. The original version was so good that it was compelling. And it was so compelling that it was worth telling. Luke tells us that many people and that's the first words of his gospel, is many people have been writing down the story of Jesus. We talked about this more in week 1. We talk about the miracle of writing that we take for granted, like how expensive it was to learn to write, like the education you had to have, and then paper was expensive and ink was expensive, and those did they write with quills? I don't know. But they weren't writing with, the little Bic pens that we have here at Tribe, though. It was expensive to document things. So why would a bunch of people sit down to write the story of a nobody from nowhere? Does anybody remember what I said in week 1 about what Nathanael said the first time he heard about the man of Jesus? They're like, hey, there's this new rabbi from Nazareth. That's your hint word. Nazareth. And Nathanael goes, Nazareth? What good could come from Nazareth? That's how tiny this little town was. Like when people are like, where are you guys from? And Matt and I are like, Whiteland. What good can come out of Whiteland, Indiana? Have you heard the name of that town? It's always awkward when you have to tell that to somebody. Like, oh yeah, we're from Greenwood. Mm-hmm. It's better. But something good must have happened if all these people wanted to write it down, and they didn't get paid to do so. But it was because they knew it was a story that needed to be told. They wanted to preserve it, and they wanted to preserve it because it was good news of great joy for all people, for every generation, for every tribe and nation. Tribe, get it? That's what we're called, guys. So what happened? What happened to the good news? Why is it that everybody isn't leaning in? Why doesn't everybody want this good news to be true? And what I think probably happened is that we happened. I think human people got a hold of the good news, and after they had their grubby paws on it, it didn't look so good anymore. After we played telephone with it for 2,000 years, instead of going back to the original news, we keep just passing on what we've heard instead of going back and figuring it out for ourselves. I have these little Rubbermaid containers that I use for different things around the house, and my mom's puppy, Augie, who's the best, worst dog on the planet, or the worst, best dog on the planet. I don't know, he's great, but he's a pain. He's so cute. He's very snuggly. And he's a great companion for my mom, and we love him so much. But he got a hold of one of my Rubbermaid containers, and you can see he has kind of done to this container what we have done to the good news of Jesus. Like he's kind of ruined it after he got his little grubby paws on it. It doesn't serve the same function that it did. It's not going to work anymore. Like, I can't put a liquid in this, and you can't really tell from, I don't know if you can tell from the picture or not, but he's actually chewed. There's little puppy teeth marks all around the top of this thing. Like, the lid is not going to go on. It doesn't work anymore. Like, does it still kind of look like the original version? Yeah. But even those small little changes have made a huge impact on the functionality and on the usefulness of this object. And I think that's what we have done to the good news. I really do. I think that's what we've done. We've done this with the message of Jesus. I think we've Americanized the good news. I think we've politicized the good news. We've made it about prosperity, about what's in it for me. I think we've intellectualized the good news. We've reduced it to something that you just believe rather than something that you do. And I've actually gotten to the point in my life where I don't want to be considered a believer in Jesus. I want to be a follower of Jesus. When people look at me, I don't want them to say, there's Carrie, she's a believer. I want them to say, look, there's Carrie. She is doing her absolute best to follow Jesus every day. Christianity has become almost like fire insurance for us. I remember one of the churches we were at before we came to Tribe. We sort of invented Tribe. One of the churches that we were at before, though, we had a woman, and she didn't attend our church. She just sort of came, and they had a very loose baptismal policy at that church. And so this is a true story, guys. She came every week for 4 weeks. She brought a different granddaughter every week for 4 weeks, and she dunked a granddaughter, or baptized a granddaughter, every week for 4 weeks, and we never saw him again. And it's not like she brought 4 little girls with her. These were teenagers. And it's not like, they were all 4 there, all 4 Sundays. No. Every week she brought one with her and dunked him. And it just kills me when I think about that, because that's not following Jesus. That is fire insurance. That is avoiding hell. That is fear-based. Like, why would you do something like that unless you were terrified? And my heart still aches for this lady and her poor granddaughters. And I remember how trapped I felt because of the way that this church dealt with baptism. And it's part of the reason that we handle that actual story is part of the reason we handle baptism so differently here at Tribe. But that is another sermon for another day. If you are interested, we are going to be having a baptismal service on January 18th. I think it's the right day. So that is coming up here soon. It'll be our first baptismal service here at our new building. It's going to be so cool. When you read the gospel, though, it is not primarily about what happens after you die. Okay, so this whole like fire insurance avoiding hell thing is even more ridiculous because the gospels, I'm not talking about the whole New Testament, I'm talking about the 4 gospels, are primarily about how you live your life here on earth. It's about how you treat people. When it gets reduced to what's in it for me or how can I avoid something that I don't want to do, no matter how it affects you, that is not good news of great joy for all people. That's not the original news. That's like the pick and choose news. That's when you pick the parts that suit you and that work for you and your family and what you currently believe without challenging yourself at all. When you decide this is the issue right here, this is the hill I'm going to die on. This is the one that matters the most. When you're the one making that decision, the moment we do that, it is no longer good news of great joy for all people. It's not. In Galatians 3:28, Paul, who we're going to talk about a lot here in just a minute, says, "There is neither Jew nor Gentile nor slave nor free, nor is there male or female, for you are all," there's that word all again, "one in Christ Jesus." If my version of the good news, and I'm guilty of this as well, is not good for the Jewish people and the Gentile people, just like what it says here, for the males and the females, the rich and the poor, the sinners and the saints, your Republican or Democratic brother, whichever one of those you don't like, the coworker who drives you up a wall, a teacher who gave your kid a C, a D, or an F, your annoying neighbor, your ex-boyfriend or girlfriend or spouse, if it is not good news for that person, it is not the original version of the good news. Paul wrote a lot of the New Testament. Paul is an actual person who actually lived, and he lived at a time when Christianity was in its infancy. And he lived during the transition from the law and the prophets being the main text that we use. We called that the law, what they called the law and the prophets, we now call the Old Testament because it wasn't old yet when they had it. And when they were transferring from that to what we would now call the gospel, or what we call the New Testament. And Paul was a Pharisee. He was a religious leader. He knew the old way backwards and forwards, just like any good little Jewish boy would have. But he became a Jesus follower. And here's what he's saying in this verse right here. When he's saying neither Jew nor Gentile, he's saying, you have never met anyone for whom the good news isn't good news. And the question that I think we need to wrestle with today specifically is, what about me? Am I good news? If you're a Jesus follower, are you good news of great joy for all people? Or are you just good news of great joy for your people? Like, you are smart enough to know that if we as humans get this right in our communities and our world and our nation, if we get this right, the world is going to be a better place. When I was trying to write this sermon this week, my kids got into a fight, so I had to go yell at them until they loved each other again. You can laugh at that, that's okay. And it reminded me, as I was doing this, I was writing the sermon and yelling at my kids and then writing the sermon again. And I got to thinking about what my dad used to do when my brother and I would fight, especially if we got into a fight in public places. I'm going to take a drink really quick because I have to sing here in a second. So if we fought in public places, he didn't talk or yell at us. He would just start singing, and they'll know we are Christians by our love, and they'll know we are Christians by our love. And I hated that as a kid. You guys, I hated that so much because I was like, because I wanted to just wail on my brother, and I couldn't because then they wouldn't know that I was a Christian because I wasn't loving my brother. I really hated this as a kid. In fact, eventually my dad got to the point where all he would have to do when John and I would start, and he'd just be like, just hum it a little bit, and But that's exactly what Jesus tells us will characterize us as his followers. His followers. He's not concerned about not that he's not concerned about your belief, but he's not like putting people into boxes. He doesn't care about the length of your hair or the type of clothing you wore or whether you do or do not have tattoos. John records the word of Jesus in John 13:35, and he says, "By this all people will know you are my disciples if you have love for one another. They will know that we are Jesus followers by the way we treat each other and by the way we treat the people around us." Every single generation of Jesus followers is responsible to ensure that our news is the original news, not to play telephone with it. And that we are giving it not only the original good news, but as it was originally intended. In Matthew 5:14, Jesus states, "You are the light of the world." You are the light of the world. You are the light of your family, of your neighborhood, of your placement of employment, of your friend group. You are the light of the world, not just your city. And the people that he said this to originally, their world was tiny, like probably not bigger than around 25 miles or so did they ever travel in their entire life. And Jesus is telling them, you are the light of the world. And keep in mind, even the best map makers at that time didn't know how big the world was. Like I used to tell my 5th graders that like when the whole Columbus thing happened, that like they went from thinking the world was like this big to thinking the world was like this big. Like it was so much bigger than they could have ever known. And Jesus isn't saying you are the light of your city or you are the light of your family. He's saying you are the light of the world. This message isn't just for you, it's for the whole world. And when it's understood properly, and it will be perceived as light. Jesus comes into your world and he turns on the light. And with light, we can see things that we cannot see in darkness. We see ourselves differently. We see the people around us differently, our friends differently, our enemies differently. Everything becomes so much clearer when you put it in the light. He goes on in verse 16 and he says, "Let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." They will see it as light when they look at the things that you do, not just the things that you believe, but the things that you actually do. And this is why we're taking all the money that's raised by Tribe this week, all of the offerings that you have brought with you today, and we are going to use those to keep the lights on and the heat on and the power on for people in Plainfield that we have never met, that may never actually know that it was us, but they will see this thing that they have done, and maybe, just maybe, they will look up to the Father in heaven and thank him for what he did through us. Y'all, there are people in Plainfield who would be sitting in dark houses on Christmas morning or going and unwrapping Christmas presents or taking Christmas presents back to keep the heat on for another month. And now they're not going to have to do that. And that is because of you. It's because you're letting your light shine. And in the past, we have stayed, I know, right? Come on, somebody. In the past, we have stayed quiet about the things that we have done in this city, but we are not going to do that this time. There is going to be a graphic that we are going to make, and by we, I mean me, that you're going to be able to post a picture and say, look, we were part of this. You can make it the wallpaper on your phone. You can put it on your social media. If that's not your thing, you can print it out and put it over your desk or put it on your refrigerator. I love putting stuff on my mirror, so I see it every morning to remind yourself that this December, after what was the hardest year that a lot of us have ever lived, you lived out the words of Matthew 5:16. You magnified the love of God. You let your light shine before others, that others may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. It is our responsibility to personify the good news. I told you we were going to talk more about the Apostle Paul. Here we go. Initially, when he heard the good news, he didn't think it was good news because he didn't understand it. He got a version of the good news. He was a Pharisee. His livelihood, like his whole world, was tied to the old way of doing things. And usually the people who benefit from the status quo are the least inclined to let go of it. And so he goes and he gets deputized, and he becomes a violent activist. And his goal is to silence the good news because he didn't think it was good news. He wanted to wipe it off the map. Remember in what they say in Pirates of the Caribbean? Dead man tell no tales. You can't spread good news if you are dead. So Paul's goal was to make you dead if you were a Jesus follower. And then Paul has this encounter on the road with a God that he didn't even know. And what happens is he starts to understand what the real news is, and he immediately lays down all of his violent ways. He does a 180 or a 360 or whatever is the appropriate rotational metaphor here. He goes on and he becomes an activist. He continues to be a missionary, but he makes a total switch in the direction. He's now an apostle. He has a whole new message. And he says in one of his letters that the only thing that really matters is faith working its way through us through love. Paul's friends from before he had this change happen to him, his friends that he had before had to have been so confused. You're the guy who was arresting people. You had people tortured. You had people killed. Paul would say, I didn't understand then. I didn't understand the news. I didn't know that it was good news of great joy for all people. And so he ends up giving his life for these Gentile people so that they could understand just how good the good news really was. He becomes a better man, and he plants churches, and he actually becomes almost like a consultant for churches. That whole story is so cool. We don't have time for it today. But he ends up writing these letters to these churches about specific things that they are doing. He writes them to human people. And those letters, some of those letters, become the books of the New Testament. Like, think of it like this, guys. For the most part, if the book of the Bible is the name of a city, and it's in the New Testament, it was probably written by Paul, okay? And it was a letter. And we're going to read a portion of his letter to the church at Philippi. And I love this, that it worked out this week, because these words that we're going to read today were actually part of the sermon that was preached at mine and Matt's wedding 16 years ago last Friday. And I love that my dad, who was the one who married us, chose to speak these words over us, because these words have become an integral part of our marriage. So if you've ever looked at Matt and I and you've been like, man, like something in there is working, this is it. Right here, okay? Philippians 2, this is 1 through 5. We're actually going to end up going 1 through 15. Write that down right now. Put it in your phone. Text it to yourself. Text it to your spouse. Whatever. Read these words this week. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness or compassion. So what Paul is saying is, if there's anything about following Jesus that's come your way that's good, if you have benefited from knowing Jesus, this is what I want you to do. I want you to make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one in mind. Paul is saying to these little church plants 2,000 years ago, and he's saying to us today too, I want you to be unique in how you treat each other. He's saying, I want you to allow the good that comes your way to overflow into your relationships. We say that here all the time. We've just made it really short. We say, loved people love people. This isn't just something that you believe. This isn't just something that you believe about a new kingdom or a new way of viewing an old God. This is something that you do. And Paul goes on to tell us how to live lives that are so good that people will think that the gospel is good. And this is what he tells us to do. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but rather in humility value others above yourselves. This is what Jesus modeled for us. The most commonly known verse in the Bible is John 3:16. If you only know one verse, that's the one to know. For God so loved the world that he gave. He gave. For God so valued everybody that he put others before himself. He sent his son to die for your sin. You are not more valuable than God, but God treated you like you were. And this is what Paul is saying. You do for others what God through Christ has done for you, and this is good. When people see this, they're going to say, that is good. I don't know what I believe. I don't know if I can buy into everything you believe about Jesus, but I'll tell you what, those people over there at Tribe, they know how to love people well. They paid off electric bills for people that don't even go to their church. And they didn't even go through an organization who vetted and made sure that people were worthy of having this gift given to them. Not that there's anything wrong with going through an organization. Those are good things, and there are lots of good organizations that are doing good things in Plainfield, but we're not doing that. We're not going to be like, oh, you're trying to get your ducks in a row. No, we don't care. I don't care what you spent the money that you should have spent the money on for your heat this month. I don't care. We're still going to pay it off. We're not going to determine if you're worthy to get it. We're just going to do it. And Paul goes on, he says, not looking to your own interests, but each of you should look to the interests of others. God chose to put you first, and that is what we are called to do. Paul puts the interests of others ahead of his own, we are called to put the interests of others ahead of our own. The people that you think deserve it, and the people that you definitely know for sure do not deserve it. And if you were on the internet Thursday night when the town of Plainfield announced its plans for this parking garage over here, folks, we have been given a massive opportunity to show grace and mercy and respect, even if it kills me, to people that we know definitely don't deserve it. This is what Jesus followers do. Not what they believe. We've got that down. This is what they do. Paul goes on, he says, in your relationships with others, with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Which relationships is he talking about here? Because he's not specific. All of them. I said earlier that we had this read at our wedding. So here's what you can do. Start with your spouse. And then just keep making that circle bigger and bigger and bigger until you have all of your people in it. And then all the tribe people, and then all of Plainfield, and just keep going and going and going. When you have the same mindset as Jesus in your relationships, you defer to people first. You will do what is best for people first. And that is unusual. That is not the way the world works. But it does represent the values of the kingdom of God. What if our lives were characterized and personified the good news? The Apostle Paul takes the message of Jesus and he expands on it and he expounds on it in ways so that we can understand it and apply it to our lives. He's going to go on in verse 6. And again, I want you to remember, these are not words that were written in English to be read in Plainfield in 2020. They were written by a man who went from being on one side of Christianity to the other, and they were written to a living, breathing group of people in the town of Philippi. Paul was a person who knew Peter and James. That's actually where he got a lot of his knowledge about Jesus. Peter was, the rock. We talked about that lots of times. But James is the brother of Jesus. The testimony of James is so powerful to me because think about this. He was the brother. Not like, Jeff is my brother from another mother. Not like that. No, this is the actual brother, same mom, same dad as Jesus. If you're Catholic, you're like, whoa, I know. Same mom, same dad. Because believing that, Jesus was born of a virgin, that's a miracle. But believing that a man and a wife never got down to business, that's gullibility, okay? Jesus had a brother. His name was James. What would your brother have to do to convince you he was the Son of God? Think about your brother. I'm thinking about my brother right now. I'm thinking about John Ashbaugh right now. He would have to do a whole lot to convince me that he was the Son of God. Like a whole lot, okay? So Paul has been to Jerusalem. He's spent time with people who have spent time with Jesus. And this is what Paul says when he's talking about Jesus. Jesus, who? This is who he's talking about when he says who? Jesus, who? Being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his advantage. Meaning that God and Jesus, they're the same. They are on the same level. They are equal. Okay? You're like, I don't understand the whole Trinity thing. Good, me neither. You don't need to. Just know that it exists, okay? It's like how do planes fly, really? You just get on the plane. It's fine. Anyway, nothing else. I'm entertaining Matt Dilley today. Who in very nature, God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Like, God showed up among mere mortals and never powered up. He never used his power and his influence for his own benefit. Jesus leveraged his power and his influence for those who had less power and less influence. Imagine what our world would look like if we all did this. Or make it a little smaller. Imagine what our country would look like if every American did this. Or make it a little smaller. Imagine what Indiana would look like if everyone did this. Imagine what the town of Plainfield, if even just the leaders in Plainfield did this. Imagine what your family would look like if you never played the I'm too tired, or I worked too late, or too hard, or too much. That's not my job. Like, Jesus didn't use the fact that he was equal with God to his own advantage. I think you can clean out the dishwasher even if it's not your turn. If we would do this, it would increase the lifespan and the quality of life for millions of people across the world. But we can start with our own families here today. Is the message of Jesus good? Are you kidding me? That God came to earth and leveraged his power and his influence for those who had no power and no influence. There isn't anything better than that. And that is the relationship we want with the people around us. But Paul still wasn't done. He says, rather, he made himself nothing. He was a nobody from nowhere. Like, no one, when you think about like the whole is it true thing, is it true? Like, if you were going to make up the story of a king, and that's how Jesus was presented to those people, he was going to be a king. They were expecting like a literal king, like the son of a king, to come and then be a prince and then grow up and then be the king and like take over. They would not have made up a story where they're like, oh, okay, let's make up a story. So where should we make this guy from? Nazareth. Where? Exactly. Nazareth. He was a nobody from nowhere. Who should we make his parents be? Like, should they be royal? No, let's go with a 13-year-old virgin. Okay, that sounds good. Perfect. No. If you were going to make up Jesus, you would have made his early days, where he's from, who raised him, etc. You would have made all of that better, I promise you. But rather, he made himself nothing by taking on the very nature of a servant, made in human likeness and found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Even death on a cross. Folks, we are so lucky that we'll never have to see a crucifixion or smell a crucifixion. Because the moment that Jesus was the most glorified was the moment that we would have been the most humiliated. We would have looked away because we physically couldn't have stomached it. Okay? I talked about my brother earlier. Dude would have had a seizure. He's got that thing where he sees blood. He goes bananas. It's bad. It's real bad. But do you know why they chose crucifixion as their method of getting rid of Jesus? It's exactly what I said earlier. Dead men tell no tales. And they didn't want this tale to be told. They wanted to wipe him off the map. And so that's why they went with crucifixion, because it was a humiliating way to die. Your friends would be so humiliated by the fact that you were crucified, they would have said that they would have never spoken of you again. They wouldn't have mentioned you and be like, oh, remember that guy, Jesus? No, that doesn't happen when you're crucified. That's why it wasn't surprising to people when Peter starts denying Jesus, because that's what people did. They're like, do you know that guy up on the cross? They're like, no. I thought I saw you with him last week. That wasn't me. That's what people did. This wasn't uncommon. Okay? Your family would have disowned you. It would have been as if you were never existed. This is this end that your Savior chose. This is how he punctuated his point in the most powerful way. I have come to serve and give my life as a ransom for many. Jesus is asking us to follow him today, to figure this out in our own lives, in our families, in our finances, to emulate the love that he showed for us. Is Christianity good? Is the message of Jesus good? Are you kidding? There is nothing better than that. He came as a king to reverse the order of everything, and he invites us to follow him. Imagine if the global leaders of this word would embrace even just one of these ideas, how much good it would release. It's good. It's really, really good. We're going to skip down to verse 12. Paul says, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. This is not a one and done thing. It's not just like we dunk you and then you're good to go. At Tribe, we say it like this: everything that is healthy grows. Paul goes on, he says, for it is in God who works in you and who will act in order to fulfill his good purpose. God's purpose that is outlined in Philippians 2, 1 through 8. Go back, like I said, go back and read those again this week. Is upside down kingdom where the first shall be last and the last will be first, where we use our power and influence for people who don't have power and don't have influence, where we love others in the same way that Christ loves us. That is the invitation. Is that a good invitation? Is that good news? It is, because it changes us from the inside out. When we do good things happen around us. That's why we say every week, we don't want something from you, we want something for you. We say that every single week. And Paul wraps up with these words: do everything without grumbling and arguing so that you may become blameless and pure. Do you know what it means to be blameless? I think people sometimes think that means that you're perfect, and it's not that at all. It doesn't mean that you're perfect. A blameless person is someone who owns their mistake before they can be blamed for them. So if you can get your kids to do this, I have to say it really takes the wind out of your sails as a parent. Because when your kid comes up to you and is like, hey, I hit Bailey. I apologized, and we talked it out. I'm going to try really hard not to do it again. And then we hugged, and, everything's all good now. And you're just like, cool. Like, you're like, thank you, Jackson. That was a good choice. Like, what do you even do as a parent? The parenting's gone at that moment. Blameless means, yes, I'm going to mess up, but then I'm going to own it. I'm going to own it so quickly that you are not going to be able to blame me. You're not going to catch me because I'm going to find you and I'm going to confess it before you ever find out. Do everything without complaining and grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God, without fault in a warped and crooked generation. And then Paul reaches back and quotes Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount, and he says, when you do this, when you embrace this, the results are going to be what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. He says, and then you will shine like stars in the sky. Shine in the world like stars in the sky. Your selflessness will stand in stark contrast to the selfishness that we see in the world. You want to change the world? There's your outline. You want to change your marriage? You want to change your relationship with your parents or your kids? There's your outline. Philippians 2, 1 through 15. Regardless of how the world pushes back, if we can do this, that is good. So how does good news behave? I want to give you 4 suggestions. And I've already touched on all 4 of them. So Matt, sit down. I am almost done, dude. Just calm down. I'm almost done. 4 suggestions to be the light of the world. Here we go. Number 1, apologize immediately. You are going to mess up, and I'm going to mess up. If we just apologize immediately, own it and own it quickly. Stop justifying your actions, because all that does is spread it out and make it messy. Apologize immediately, because then you'll be blameless. And this is going to open up a whole new level of love and respect in your relationship and in your life, okay? Number 2 is forgive quickly. We have to forgive quickly because we're forgiven. Yeah, sometimes there's going to be stuff that needs to be worked through, and that sucks, and I'm sorry. But the forgiveness, we can do that quickly. And the next one, number 3, is defer habitually. That means you put someone else first. That's literally what defer means. If you go to someone's house this holiday season, make the host eat before you do. Just freak them out. It'll be awesome. Love it. Okay? Start really, really small. Open the door for the people around you. Start doing this in little tiny ways. Like Matt gets out my flosser for my teeth every night. So simple. Such an easy little way to put someone else in front of you. Just little things, little tiny things. And the last one is give sacrificially. Because God so loved the world that he gave. Let's do it. Matt and I set a goal in November for Tribe Church to pay off the electricity bills and keep the lights on for 20 families in the town of Plainfield. And then at the beginning of December, because we're like, how are we going to do that? 20 families, oh my gosh. We had an anonymous donor tell us that they would double every dollar up to $2,000. And I am fully prepared for you to blow us all away with your generosity today. To blow off your generosity for a town that has really irritated some of us this week. What an awesome, awesome thing to love that town anyway, because we were loved first. And love people, love people. Let's pray. God, you came into a world where people who had power and influence used that power and influence to gain more power and influence, and you turned it on its head. Through the life and the teachings and the death and the resurrection of your son, Jesus, you gave power to the powerless and a voice to the voiceless. And God, somewhere along the way, I think the message was lost. But I think there are some people that the message is getting clearer for them today. And maybe they don't understand it fully, God, but I ask that you would just help them to be brave enough to just raise their hand and say, you know what? Yeah, I don't know what it means to be a believer. Whatever. But I want to follow. I want to do what Levi did. I want to do what Peter did. I want to do what James did. I want to follow Jesus. And if you are praying this with me right now, I just pray that you would be bold enough to raise your hand and say, yeah, I'm ready. I don't know exactly how this is all going to shake out, but I'm ready to follow Jesus. And we're not going to make you come up to the front if you raise your hand. We're not going to do anything weird that makes you uncomfortable. We're just going to, just right where you are. If this is your first yes or your 4,000th yes, I pray that you would say, God, I'm with you. I want to follow you. I'm not totally sure what I believe. I don't know how this is all going to end, but I want to take a step today because I know, even if I'm not sure how I know, that your message is good news of great joy for all people, even me. Amen. Tribe, we embrace what matters and we celebrate life change no matter how small the step, because every step you take towards Jesus is important. And I'm going to pray for our offering one more time today. Your week this week, please remember that love is the best thing we do.